So you want me to log out?
No. Don't worry. I'm doing this in the background.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you can get a wine or a coffee or whatever is your poison for tonight.
Yes, we'll do.
Okay, so I paste the link here.
Okay. I'll send that to Alex. Try following that link.
Just on this.
Share my screen.
This one.
I'll just share my screen with you guys, isn't it?
Yep.
Great.
I'll make sure you are allowed. Yep, you're allowed.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Shall I start sharing already?
If you just wait 1 second whilst we get a few more people to join.
Yes, sure.
We'll let you know when to go. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
I'm just going to share that to our community.
Thanks for doing this, by the way. Never had the time to. Thank you for that.
Change on the bio as well.
Okay, can you post that Instagram story?
Time to. Thank you for.
I'll change the bio.
Can you post that Instagram?
Okay, that changed. David. Just leave it.
Just leave it because this one will go on afterwards.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Can you check what our Facebook name is? And then we'll post it onto Facebook because you can't post the link onto the story.
Change what?
Or can I post that link?
Shall we give it a start, guys?
Okay, cool.
Someone's covered.
That's just as updated our social media posts with the new link. So what I'll do is I'll give my wee intro and then pass on to you guys.
That's been put up there as well.
Yep.
So thanks for bearing with us there, everyone. We had a couple of technical difficulties starting, but we're just going to get started now. So this week we're joined by Daan Roggeveen from More Architecture. More Architecture are practice based in the Netherlands and Shanghai. So we're very lucky to have Daan as our guest with us this week. We're also joined by Theo Donas, who will be hosting the event and keeping us on track. As always, feel free to pop any questions into the comment section and we'll pass them on to Daan. I'm just going to pass over to Theo now. He's going to chat to us a little bit about our China Chats series.
Good.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for that. This is a slightly new format with 5710, but everything is new this year or different. So the Sutherland School of Architecture and Built Environment, in collaboration with the 5710 Architecture Student Society, are organizing China Chats this academic year, which is a series of presentations and discussions on architecture and urbanism in China and, by extension, potentially the rest of the world. So I've invited a series of prominent architects that are active in China to present and discuss their work with the school and a wider audience that is interested in human habitats and their development. And staff and students from Sutherland School will act as essentially discussants and try to critically understand China's architectonic condition and the promise for a positive future development. We might seem that we're far away from the Far East, right? But Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland have deep connections with the Far East, established the art influences and commerce for more than 2 centuries. One can name Thomas Blake Glover and his arrival in Japan through Shanghai, essentially, but also the great influences that the Far East has had on Art Nouveau architecture in Scotland. And from our point of view, the school has a long history of investigating a balance between urban and rural development. And even though China has been, as Daan very well knows, a very strong proponent of urban development, rural development in terms of architecture is becoming much more important for China's strategy of development in the next 10 years. And this dual engagement of the school with rural and urban architecture has recently produced a series of research and design projects by staff and students, which are interesting for this dialogue. I'm very happy we have Daan with us today because he has been not only an active and practicing architect, but also a theoretician and an author and an intellectual, essentially discussing the Chinese model of development in terms of architecture. And I think it's really interesting to have him tell us about his experiences and have a discussion on whether for example, China could be a model for developing architecture all over the world. Daan, up to you. You should be able to share your screen. And thank you for doing this, and up to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. Thanks for the invitation to speak tonight. When I was discussing this afternoon with my team on how to approach this lecture, we basically discussed. I got two advices: one, keep it short; two, either do 0 images or do a lot of images. I choose the latter one, but if in case you want to sort of have a more open discussion without any slides or whatever, that's also fine with me. So in case you're preferring that, then please let me know. Okay, so I assume that I'll take the floor with
yes. Yeah, you can take the floor, and then I'll jump in as soon as there is something. And we have also the comments from the viewers on YouTube. So any questions we'll sort to interlocute and politely interrupt so you can answer.
Very good. Very good. Do so. Please do so. I prepared a bit of a story that actually touches upon the two themes that you just introduced. One is, let's say, the relationship between East and West, and how I, as an architect, or we as a firm, sort of relate to that. And the second is, urban-rural development. So somehow the relationship between the urban and the rural in China. Now, this is a topic and a field of interest that I could talk about for hours. But I'll prepared a couple of slides and stories that will take around 40-45 minutes, I guess. So I hope to you can bear with me. I'll start sharing my screen, and then let's hope this all works. Very good. Let me just make it full screen. Just as a sort of starting point, this picture is for me very indicative of for my situation for a long time, somehow being sort of balancing myself out between two worlds. And that's also what I want to talk about today. Our office is called More Architecture, officially sort of that name derived from multidisciplinary office for research and architecture.
We've lost your sound.
Oh
no, sorry. No, you're good. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Good. I'll just. But somehow I think our ambition is particularly about doing more than just architecture, going beyond the boundaries of architecture. Maybe our Chinese name even underlines that even better. Which means something like beyond, studio beyond. So somehow, if you talk about East and West and the difference in understanding, then.
Dan, sorry for interrupting. I think you've when you have your screen full screen and you're sharing your desktop, we only see a black screen at the moment.
Okay.
If you share through sharing, if you share your whole screen, then whatever happens on your screen, we'll be able to see it. So you need to stop sharing and then reshare and share your whole screen.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I mean, happens all the time to me. I talk to 30 students, and it takes them about half an hour before they interrupt me to tell me I'm showing them nothing.
Okay, right. Let me see if this works. I think this should be it, no? Do you see the full screen now? No.
Yeah.
Yes?
If you can hit play, and we'll see if it works.
Okay. I'll hit play.
Yep, perfect.
Great.
Fantastic.
Great. All right. Now, I think the background of so in 2008, I decided to go east, so to leave Amsterdam and move to Shanghai for a while to sort of set up shop there and start working there. And what I actually started doing was collaborating with these people. This is Michiel, a journalist, Dutch journalist, and this is Vivian. She was our researcher and fixer, translator, research assistant. And we started developing an interest in cities in central and western China. So basically our mission was go west. So we wanted to explore central and western China, and particularly the cities in these western regions. And that was, in the end, that led to a book, How the City Moved to Mr. Sun. And this book basically described the transformation of cities in western China. So we all know that urbanization started in the coastal regions of China. Here it says 40 years ago, well, 30 years ago, because I've been using this slide for 10 years, so now I have to update it. One of the people that we ran into in this whole research was Mr. Sun in the city of Suzhou. And this guy has been the namesake of our book, of course, How the City Moved to Mr. Sun, but it's also been one of, so he was our protagonist in a way, but also I think this story was very telling for what happened in China over the past 3 decades. So this is Mr. Sun, and he's a farmer who lived on in the outskirts of or actually on the fringe of a huge city called Suzhou. And he lived in his house together with his in his village together with his brothers and his father. This is Mr. Sun in the early 80s here on the right side, and in front is his dad. And this family was very poor, of course. So they were farmers. Maybe they would eat meat once a year, and for the rest they would just farm their land. But at a certain point, the city started to reach their village, and somehow that was a sort of moment in which Mr. Sun decided to do something very radical, to take down his house and to build a new house. That's this house. And that decision was so radical that in the end, Mr. Sun had a house of 800 square meters overlooking a farm field. A golf course, and the golf course used to be his farm field. So where he used to sort of grow his food was now the place for people who would play golf. And he was actually overlooking that from his rooftop terrace, where he would grow 26 different types of crops. And Mr. Sun is not the only farmer who in China who does that. There's 1 million farmers per year who break down their house and build up a new apartment building there. So that leads to these kind of environments, which we call urban villages, which are very intricate and intimate kind of urban neighborhoods with very dense build-up, very active plinth, so very active street life, and above that residences, but also schools and so forth. So a very high dense mixed urban typology. And the village of Mr. Sun, you can see the house of Mr. Sun over here, is also such a neighborhood. So very dense, very intricate bottom-up urbanism, as you could call it. As opposed to sort of the type of urbanism that is very typical for China, which is the Xiaoqu, the residential compound, with towers that are facing north-south and that have a privatized urban space in between them. And these Xiaoqus, of course, are very popular right now. Over the past 2 decades, have been very, very popular with the growing urban middle class in China. And the result of that is also that actually, let's say, China's urban landscape is basically residential compounds. So there's no other typology, and that goes even to the point that model makers start complaining about the fact that they always have to make the same models simply because this is the only residential building that's being built in the country.
Dan, sorry again. I think you're still on the map of the global map. Go east, right? Oh. So I think the slides are not changing again.
So I've okay. Wait, what do we do?
One thing we could do is you could send me. Is it a big presentation?
I'll send you the Dropbox link. Maybe that's the best.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I? Well, I can also.
The moment you share screen, or the other thing you can do, the moment you share screen, instead of putting it full screen, just leave the slides rolling and then change from the side. We'll be able to see your interface as well, but at least like that, we'll be certain that the slides change.
Let me. How's this? Does this work?
You're not sharing anything yet?
Sorry. Okay. Yep. How about this?
Try changing. Yep. Now, perfect.
Yeah, it seems to be working now.
Thanks.
Okay. So, Mr. Sun, Mr. Sun and his family, the village reaching the countryside, the city reaching the village, and the house that Mr. Sun built, which is very critical because it's an announcement for something else. So this is Mr. Sun overlooking his golf course from the rooftop of his house. And these are the, let's say, the urban villages that I just talked about. So the village of Mr. Sun has a very intricate kind of urban structure, as opposed to the kind of top-down planned residential compound that is so ubiquitous in China. Even to the point that model makers are complaining about the sort of repetition in their work, simply because the buildings that are being designed are always similar. And the result of that is that China roughly looks like this. So this is what the China's residential landscape looks like. But there is, of course, an alternative, and that is this, a kind of more bottom-up development that is happening all over the country, actually, particularly in the city of Shenzhen, where roughly 30% of the neighborhoods are built following this model of urban villages, where farmers are building up private developments, small towers, even quite high towers, as you can see here, that are filling in gaps built on their own former farmland. So with that concept in mind, we look back at the map of Shijiazhuang. This is the city of Shijiazhuang, 1 hour from Beijing. And all the yellow patches are basically urban villages, are former villages that are now surrounded by city. And these places are, well, so as we understand them from an urban perspective, they're interesting, they're mixed, they're affordable, they are places of mixed use and dynamics and so forth. But from the perspective of city planning departments in China, they are called urban cancer. So they're not particularly popular with urban planners. And that's also a reason why the village of Mr. Sun looked like this when we visited it for the first time. It was almost like a post-nuclear war zone, because this very image was the ambition of the city at that point, to create a Wanda Plaza there, a residential neighborhood with 2 million square meters of real estate organized in towers, sitting on kind of large shopping malls. And of course, Mr. Sun and his fellow residents were not very happy with that sort of ambition. So they started complaining and they started protesting, but without any kind of result. So when we were visiting Mr. Sun in his village, this is basically the house that I just described. So ground floor with retail facilities, and above that an apartment for himself and his wife, and on top small units that he would rent out to migrant workers. And of course with this fantastic rooftop garden on the top that you see here popping out. So this is the last time we saw the village of Mr. Sun. And then we received a message over Chinese New Year's 2010 that this was actually the site of the house of Mr. Sun, which is of course a very sad message. And from there onwards it went very quickly. So this was 3 months later, when the developer put up the signs for the transformation of the area. This was 1 year later, April 2011. This was September 2011. And then this was April 2012. So in 2 years' time, it went from an urban village to this massive type of transformation, 5 times the World Trade or the Empire State Building in New York in terms of square meters. So this was, I mean, I've seen quite some fast developments in China, but this was pretty shocking to me. So that was also the reason when I visited this village in 2012. I also asked myself, where is Mr. Sun now? And I went to see the location of his house, but that was now a Starbucks. So then I realized, okay, I have to try and figure out to find Mr. Sun. And luckily, Vivian, the girl that I mentioned before, our assistant, was super talented in finding people. So she was able to find this guy back in a city of 7 million people. This guy didn't have a mobile phone in the day, so somehow she was able to trace him and find him in the apartment of his son, watching the science channel of CCTV, Chinese state media. And Mr. Sun basically said, well, I'm happy I moved out because there was a lot of pressure from city planning, from the city and from the real estate firm to move out. So they had there was a very brutal strategy to force people to move out. But and I got quite some money from my house, $75,000, which is quite a lot of money if you think about it. That Mr. Sun only had primary school and never was just a farmer in the outskirts of a city. But it's not so much money if you think of it as 800 square meter of prime real estate in a second-tier city near Beijing. So this is to say that the story of Mr. Sun has actually several. No, you know, it's not a winner or loser story, but it has several shades of gray in a way. But in the end, the story was particularly inspirational for us as a firm to start thinking about working in China as a design firm. So so Mr. Sun has always been kind of great inspiration, and also always been maybe also an inspiration for our first project in China that I'd like to start discussing now. And of course, this all ties back to the big story about Chinese cities, which is urbanization. So you see that, let's say, China has always been a rural society, right? So Mr. Sun and his fellow farmers have always been the vast majority of the Chinese population, but that changed after 1978, the opening up of China, and let's say right now, around 2020, the majority of let's say more than 50% of the people in China live in cities, but still the level of urbanization is lower than in Europe, US, or other countries in the world. So this is, of course, the bigger picture. Shall I continue, or are there any questions in the meantime?
No questions at the moment. I think this served as a really nice introduction. So it would be fantastic to see the what this inspired essentially in terms of taking an architectonic position.
Great. Well, we were asked in so by 2012, the research was done, and also my book was published, and then I started to get out to find work, and me and my partner found a project in the city of Jiaxing, 1 hour drive from Shanghai. And this is the site that we were looking at. This is our site in 2006, so 6 years before we started working there. As you can see, total rural area with small villages around kind of small waterways. The villages are very lengthy, have a very small build-up, and are also very much organized in east-west orientation. So all the houses are facing south. And you see that the only sort of sign of modernity is this kind of gigantic road that is sitting here. this typical kind of oval-shaped roundabout, I'd say, and for the rest, it's all countryside. And interestingly enough, so this is 2006, and this is 2015. So 9 years later, the area looked like this. So you still recognize this small island, but for the rest, actually everything is urbanized. So this is 9 years of urban development. And I think that transformation is kind of typical for China. And we just saw the example of Mr. Sun. Well, these are, of course, many Mr. Suns in these kind of small farms. But the question was, so you also see this building here, and it is actually our building that we try to develop as an alternative for this kind of urbanization. So we were asked to make a mixed-use proposal for a mixed-use building, 16,000 square meter, combination of hotel, office space, sports facilities, and so forth. And we made of course, a ton of options for it. And in the end, we selected this one as the most having the most potential. And that is a mixed-use building with a hotel on the south, short stay apartments, a gallery, and sports facilities surrounding a central square. And this is the building in 2016 when it was just finished. And so you see that the scale of the building is actually very sort of intricate and small, and trying to refer to this kind of feeling of an urban village, not in form or shape or materialization, but more in terms of typology and scale. Trying to mix functions, trying to also activate the roofs and activate the square as a place for public gatherings and so forth. So you see here, this is a view over the central square, where you see the hotel at the back. And you also see staircases running down towards the conference center that sits below. So this is the section of the building where you see on the right-hand side, you see a pool hanging over a restaurant facility, and below that there's a conference center. And on the left side, there's in pink highlighted the gallery space that is actually kind of running from the basement level to the third floor. So this is the gallery building actually, that is then connected to the central square. So somehow the building is this kind of, you could say mini Guggenheim, with a staircase that is actually the gallery that runs from the basement to the third floor. And this gallery runs modern art shows, photography, also contemporary paintings, and is very much kind of targeting also the children as an audience. So there is this kind of ambition of the client to educate kids in art and contemporary art, which is of course a fantastic ambition. On top of this gallery, there's an auditorium that was opened 2 years ago. Well, the whole complex, the whole gallery was opened 2 years ago. So there you see that we actually moved from this state to this state in 10 years, not only in terms of hardware, but also in terms of software. So also let's say the cultural infrastructure that allows for a gallery to kind of flourish, and the education that comes with that also is part of that urbanization process. And I find that actually super interesting in the sense that this graph says something about where people live, but it also says something about what people do. So that contemporary art and contemporary culture can be part of contemporary life and urban life. And I find that a super interesting consequence of this graph, actually. And we also see that in the next project that I would like to discuss, that kind of also this project coincided with me starting to travel between East and West, because my family, my wife and kids moved from Shanghai back to Amsterdam, and but I still had my office in Shanghai, of course. So I was sort of in limbo between Amsterdam and Shanghai. Started to travel back and forth every month. spending the majority of my time in Shanghai, and then every now and then also trying to kind of have a kind of private life. And that was the moment that we were asked to work on this project, a museum project in the same city, actually, Jiaxing. And for this project, I really wanted to go kind of back to basics. So I wanted to try to, what I found very annoying in the Jiaxing Island project was this kind of idea of layer upon layer upon layer of materials. So kind of a supersize me feeling of the building, as in that it becomes very fat and very sort of over dimensioned in all kinds of ways. So my sort of personal or architectural quest was to see if we could sort of get to the bare bone of what architecture could be about. And the question that we got was to make a proposal for a museum on this island in a artificial lake in Jiaxing. And that island was surrounded by small villages. So again, talking about the relationship between urban and rural, I was very much inspired by this idea of the, let's say, the village as a construct of let's say undefined space where you explore instead of that you're presented with something that is super in your face. So more the idea that if you could, can you just walk around and sort of explore in a predictable way. So that became the leading theme for this project. So the question was almost like, can we turn a village into a museum? Can we use the scale and the sort of the unorganized structures of a village as a way to sort of discover and explore? And the other thing was that our client actually wanted to have a kind of iconic proposal, a kind of icon, and I thought it was kind of out of place in this particular context. So we proposed to do the opposite, to make a very modest structure, actually, that is kind of more inward looking in all kinds of ways, and that tries to be a combination of two, let's say, classical museum typologies. So on one hand, let's say the Schinkel type, that is a sequence of rooms, and on the other hand, a kind of Mies type, which is the free floor plan, right? And to kind of merge these two typologies into one. So how could you combine the guided typology and the free plan typology into one museum? And that's actually this floor plan. So trying to sort of merge these two with a structure that on the one hand, is very close on the south side. So this is the south of the facade. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but somehow this is the south.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, and then from here there's the entrance, and then from there the museum develops actually in scale. So the rooms are going from smaller to bigger. Sorry. Not only in width but also in depth and in height. So sort of this the scale of the museum develops itself in 3 dimensions. And at the heart of the museum,
is it the garden in the middle?
Yes, there's 2 gardens in the middle, and the museum is opening itself towards the north, so towards the lake. So somehow there's also this clear relationship between the art and the nature. So the gardens are indeed here. So and the building sits on the top of on the north side of the artificial island. And in the master plan for the island, we also try to sort of incorporate smaller structures for sitting and for exhibiting art and so forth. And again, I wanted to sort of explore this idea of this kind of solid museum, the museum as a, what you see is what you get almost, structure. So in situ concrete, and as a base material, so to make it a very heavy kind of solid kind of structure, and then opening up to the north as a more transparent kind of structure, with this kind of sequence of spaces leading up towards the lake. And this is always one of my favorite pictures. This is our team in early 2018 discussing with the client and with the engineers the structure of the building. And somehow this always reminds me of this painting of Rembrandt, which is where the famous Dr. Nicholas Tulp sort of it's called an anatomic lesson. So it's but in the end, what I think for me the painting is about is trying to really understand what's going on, right? Trying to sort of analyze the sort of the content and the bones and structures of the subject of research. And for us, that was really the roof. So the roof, using the roof as a kind of beam, is so to make these huge spans with actually this kind of very typical shape. Was something that we really wanted to explore in this museum. So here you see the kind of very simple floor plan that is based on this idea of the wall, as the sort of the concrete wall is load-bearing structure, and on top of that we have the curved concrete. And here you see the section where actually the spaces become higher the more you go through the museum. Yeah, so that's somehow was the intention, and I sort of then in I think February 2019 I saw this picture for the first time. This was a drone shot from our client of the island, and here you see a kind of piling installation, a small excavator, and I couldn't be happier than on that day, because that day I knew that we were really going to build that museum. And that is, yeah, I mean, that is the almost looking at the how do you say it, predictor stick of your wife and knowing that she's pregnant in a way. Well, and that was, but it was all in the metaphor even carried on, because somehow in 9 months also the whole thing was the whole baby was there. So this is the summer of 2019, only 4 months after seeing this sort of piling installation on site, where we were kind of checking for the first time with the workers the concrete, and then in the fall of like in the summer they were starting to prepare the precast concrete. And what I found very beautiful of that moment is that you see people that are doing very scary things, but also in a kind of, the structure is very ephemeral, right? So it feels very, very light. It's almost like these guys are walking on air, right? With these very thin steel bars that they're preparing. And then only a few months later, this is I think, September 2019, we started to pour the concrete, and that was actually a very, very rough kind of way of working. So here, this is a drone shot of the top of the building, where you see the curves of the roof. So you see the cast, actually, the wooden cast, just before they pour the concrete, and that happens like this. So that is, yeah. I mean, very rough job, and that is the other thing that I was very interested in. So in the first project you saw, we had endless debates about the detailing of the project, because it had an endless set of details and of different connections, different angles, and so forth, and that made it very difficult to control the quality of the project. It was very time consuming and also very frustrating, because in a way, you want to make almost like a Spanish building in a context that is Chinese, and that is somehow very difficult. And in this case, we were, I think, also way closer to the quality of what China is good at, which is a combination of raw industrial production, a lot of human labor, and at the same time also manufactured mass products, and that combination of raw products and mass products was a great combination. So and that also led to somehow a speedy process, but also I think a type of architecture that is very dramatic and doesn't need a lot to sort of achieve its goal. So this is let's say the moment the baby is born. In a way, still kind of needs to be cleaned up a bit, but at the same time, you can already read the character of the person in the making. This is October 2019, and I have to say that was a very kind of emotional moment to see the building being released from its scaffolding in a way. And that also happened in a very messy. I mean, this is not the most organized construction site ever, as you can see. And even that was the building could also handle that. You know, you see this guy scratching the walls here. I mean, the light here is, yeah, the contrast of this the structure there is already very dramatic. And then this morning, actually, I had a phone call with my team. So the pictures that you see here they've been taken today. Actually, I just received them from China. And this is the current situation where they are putting in the furniture, actually. So that is even a small movie where they are now finishing up the final details of the museum. It's going to open early next year. But you see, so they still have to do the sort of the curtain system here in the ceiling. They have to clean up the handrails, but it's...
I'm heartened that they already have a security. I saw a security guard in one of the videos. So yes, they already have a security guard to take care that nobody goes in and you know, steals any of the furniture and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We have a series of questions coming in.
Sure.
Do you want me to read you some of it, and you may have a kind of maybe a break as well on answering this? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the questions that students have is, you know, where do these initial model ideas come from, right? So are you just playing with materials? Does this come from talking to the client when you have your first ideas? Is it the site or the context, right? But I want to connect this with another more question that potentially has to do with people never been to China but seeing this from a distance, right? Which is, how do you kind of respond to the vernacular of China, right? So more so when you see this changing by the weeks, right? Like you go in the first site visit, you meet the client, you make a first design, and then you, as you very well described, right? You go 6 months later, and nothing you based your own design on is there, right? It's gone, either gone or radically changed.
Yeah. No, that's so. Maybe to answer the second question first, that is very difficult. So it is very difficult to respond to a context that's constantly changing, which also means maybe is maybe it says something about. It's a very fundamental issue, of course, and it says a lot about Asia in a way. So the fact that in Asia, traditionally, physical structures are less important than place. So the location itself is the place. The meaning of the place itself is more important than the meaning of the physical structure as such. There's temples in Japan that have been rebuilt like every 7 years or so. That's not to say that heritage is not an important topic or issue, but that's one thing. So place is very important, and that also means that, for example, the observation I did about the villages surrounding this museum, all these villages are gone right now. So that means that what we try to sort of put in place in this museum, or the inspiration we got, is from a memory. But I find it very important that you also try to sort of keep these memories in a way in a place. So this idea of the scale of the village that we try to put in this museum is in a way a memory that of a past that has been destroyed. And then to go back to the first question about how do ideas come into place, it can be through different ways. I have the tendency to sort of sort out ideas through model making, either foam cutting or playing with paper or these kind of things. And that leads to kind of basic ideas in many of the buildings that we've been doing. But sometimes these ideas are also, let's say, as you saw the selection of models in the image, the blue foam models. Sometimes these are also very random ideas, and then that's almost like a game of association. So you produce, let's say, 20 or 30 options, and then that's almost like thinking with your hands. So somehow through this kind of exercise, you also get the feeling of the scale, and you get the feeling of what actually the problem is about. So for me, I mean, I'm not that good at sketching, but I don't draw that much. But I rather use models to sort of craft my thoughts in a way.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me, because one of the things that we are trying to get to understand always in an architecture school is, you know, where do ideas come from and how you develop them, right? And one of the things that potentially is a problem with some of the students is the you know, speaking to yourself essentially, right? Because you're sketching and then you're modeling, and then you need to be kind of critical with this, right? But having lived in an architect's office for many years, part of the deal is that you have a team, right? It's not is never. I know we're presenting like you're presenting now, like this is what we did, right? And it's Daan presenting this, right? But there's a team behind it, right? So how do you formulate that relationship?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, I have one. I made one concept image actually. Concept model. So it was actually it worked like this. I was in when my family was in Amsterdam. I used to spend the weekends. Well, by the weeks that I was in Shanghai, I would also go spend the weekends in the office, and that was very often time that I could think and be on by myself. And during one of these weekends, I developed this idea of L-shaped walls that would increase in scale and in size, without a roof actually, just the walls. There's a concept image of a concept model that I produced in that weekend, and that was actually the basis for this. So I showed that concept model to my team and said, "Well, guys, this is what I have. Can you develop it further?" And by then we had a team that was very kind of 5 people that were interacting in a super intense way, and they basically developed the whole plan, and I didn't have to do anything anymore. So it was them pushing it, and then that was the basis for the whole structure. And then the plan has been picked up by 2 young architects, 2 women, who have pushed it to, well, 3 actually, and to schematic design, and then one of them became the project leader and developed it till the construction drawings. And now another person took it over and is the project leader for execution. And this is actually our most important project, and it's the least of my worries. So that's also very strange. That somehow the most impactful project is the easiest.
And I think that's one of the most fantastic things, right? When you have a team that clicks, actually, you get a project that essentially you were worried about it, but then when you have a team that executes well, suddenly that is you know, you start worrying because it's not annoying enough, right? It is smooth compared to this is what I get sometimes with projects, mostly research now, but when a project goes really smooth, you start to go, well, maybe there is something going on. Why is this so good, right?
Yeah.
You wanna go on, or we have a couple of more questions, but I've collected like over hours.
No, I could. I have one more project to show, I guess, but that is 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes. So I think that we can do some questions, and I can sort of wrap it up.
Perfect. So one of the things that that always amazes me is how do you it's very easy to kind of create cliches with China, right? So you're one of the few architects that have gone in, let's say, early enough and are able to understand the country, right? So how do you deal with let's say things that have to do with suspending, let's say, your cultural understanding, what it means to be a Westerner, or what it means to be coming from Holland, so that you're able to understand China, right? So how do you make that shift in cultural understanding?
Well, I think that so doing research has helped me a lot, of course, in sort of understanding the country. Yeah, I think that was the basis of it. Second, what helps is, of course, I think I have a profound love for China. So I really love being there and love the people and the country and so forth. So that helps in sort of trying to embrace what's going on. I think it's so you have to realize I've been in Holland now for, let's say, 1.5 years, but I spent the majority of my working life in China. So I spent like a quarter of my life there. So for me, at a certain point, it also becomes your second home and the place where my kids are born there and so forth. So I find Holland very often more difficult to deal with than China in a way.
That is an interesting part of it, right? So I've spent about 6 years in China, in Suzhou, not in Shanghai, but in a lesser tier city, right? But the coming back to Europe was a little bit difficult in the sense of having to adapt to situations where you knew China would solve them a lot more easily because of speed and scale. And I think in certain cases, I've caught myself wishing that they would, suddenly Europe would learn from China rather than in terms of architecture, right? In terms of saying, well, there are solutions to certain problems from that point of view. So what would you say, for you, could we learn from China in terms of development and in terms of architecture?
Well, that is actually, I spent quite a bit of writing on that in the past 3 years. Also, when I was traveling back and forth, that was, of course, I was sort of confronted with the other situation every 2 weeks or so. I think that really helps in kind of opening up your mind to alternatives and to sort of other potentials. I didn't include it in this lecture because I thought it would be too lengthy, but some of the things I've been working on in the past years are really trying to sort of learn from China. One thing is I believe infrastructure as a driver for cities is key. So instead of talking about putting a subway, just put a subway in the ground and then use the sort of the traffic nodes, the traffic hubs that emerge as the center points of your new development. I think that is one of the key things we should start doing. That also requires sort of upfront investment, but I think that's something we have to learn in Europe very quickly now. Densification, obviously. So how can we densification of urban fabric leads to more sustainable cities and more diverse cities and more dynamic cities. So I think that's one thing we should learn. Maybe also putting, I would say, planning culture as a driver for urban change and urban development. Of course, that happens, particularly in a country like France, Paris, you see it a lot, but here in Holland, we're not super good at that. So there's, of course, a rich culture in bottom-up sort of development of cultural life, but let's say top-down planning, strategic planning of cultural facilities as driver for urban change is not very popular.
Fantastic. I think the issue of density is important, right? In the sense that a lot of people try to keep a very romantic image about how we could solve issues. I mean, climate change, for example, is a contentious issue in terms of in architecture schools, but also in cities in Europe. And you see China having a much more, at least in my opinion, fresh approach to this by saying, well, we'll actually develop a lot faster and we'll develop technologies and densify cities to address this, rather than try to go for a culture of restraint, which is what seems to be dominant, in Europe. The clearest part is that, Europe went through an era of rebuilding after the Second World War and after its crisis. And from that point of view, it's not like we haven't done it before. We've done it before. It's somehow this kind of culture has been lost, right? Or we may have become complacent in a sense on how we do architecture, right? And the other thing I thought was really important in your talk was, starting from Mr. Song and saying, well, this is about the people. It's not just about, well, it is about the buildings as well, right? But first of all, what you're going to have is you're going to have people in the buildings, and they're going to do something about it. And that is what is going to be the exciting part once you see it, 2 years later, and it's no longer just a simple building. It's a Starbucks, and the guy has moved on, right?
Yeah, true. Very true. Yes.
I don't know if Damien, Ronan, you'd like to ask some of the questions? I'm trying to get your video started as well.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. Amy's got some questions.
So I have a question here. What are your thoughts on the rapid urbanization of cities in China? And do you think that the current type of development is sustainable? And then also a follow-up is, what are your thoughts on the livability of the large-scale rapid residential developments seen in the cities in China that you've shown?
Well, I think what we just discussed, I think that densification is a way to create more sustainable cities, simply because people are closer together and need less traffic movements to move around. So I think that from that perspective, I think that dense cities will be more sustainable than spread out suburbanization as we know it in Europe or in the US for that matter. And in terms of livability, I mean, I think many of those cities, I think, need more diversity in typology. So I think let's say the residential compound as a type needs a sort of antidote in all kinds of ways. And that's very difficult because there's a strong tradition of building north-south oriented buildings in China, combined with a strong force of real estate developers that can easily earn money with the types that they're developing right now. Let's say the status quo is always our biggest enemy, I would say, but that goes for Europe as well as for China. We're currently doing a residential project in Holland, and I've never seen more conservative clients in my life than here. Not willing to embrace change, but to push away change as a kind of response to everything. But there's also alternatives, and maybe it's also a good moment to sort of show you one alternative that we are currently developing in the Netherlands.
It's fantastic, actually, because that was one of my questions, right? Have you built in the Netherlands? Because the scale and the culture is so different.
Yeah, no, definitely. So no, this is currently under construction in China. We have a couple of other projects going on there. We're building a hotel now. We're working on a research and development center and so forth. There's a couple of other things going on. Unfortunately, I cannot travel to China since COVID. I've not been in China since But of course, we have our office in Amsterdam now. So what we try to do is sort of make a relationship between those two offices, and also try to learn from each other. And try to, on one hand, bring lessons from China to the Netherlands. That those are lessons indeed about intensification, about travel, transit-oriented development, and so forth. And we try to bring lessons in terms of sustainability and public engagement from home to China where possible. So somehow this relationship became very important. Is sort of trying to deal with both parts of the world. And when I arrived back in Amsterdam, I started doing what I did in China as well, is writing a book. So basically, this idea of writing a book as a first start to start to understand your environment. We invited 12 experts on urban development to come to Amsterdam and discuss their work, their field of work, and look at those developments or look at that work as lessons for Amsterdam. And then we started working in collaboration with Studio Nauta from Rotterdam on a project in Rotterdam. So we have a couple of things in Rotterdam in development currently. One is a housing project of 30 apartments that is currently in the let's say DD phase. This project is in SD phase, and it's called the school. And it's based actually on a lecture that I attended 2 years ago by the mayor of Rotterdam. This is the mayor of Rotterdam, very interesting person, but he announced this headline said this is the headline of the AD, which is the newspaper of Rotterdam, actually. Very lousy newspaper, but it's the newspaper of Rotterdam. And it says, Abu Talib, that's the name of the mayor, says, build schools in residential towers. So he says basically, I don't mind densification, but please create public programs in the plinth, create public programs in the base of these schools. And then we came across a client that is the owner of this school, actually, this school building, this former school building in the center of Rotterdam. And this building is currently being used as a school, and this is out of use. And somehow this school wants to have an expansion. So they need 500 square meters extra. And at the same time, this client wants to go build a tower on top of the school. So then we started talking and basically developed this concept of a tower that was inspired by the, let's say, modernist architecture of the 50s of Rotterdam. As you all know, Rotterdam has been bombed in the war, so it lacks the sort of pressure of the past that Amsterdam is so much. So we have the burden of history here in Amsterdam, and of course Rotterdam doesn't have that burden anymore, and that's very liberating. And that is what I also recognize from China, of course. That if you're sort of considering history not as part of the debate anymore, that can be very liberating. Anyway, so we took this as an inspiration and then started to discuss the red volume here that you see as sitting next to this kind of white building that is the school. And then we made this proposal, which we call the school, 100 affordable homes plus a primary school. So affordable homes for which is a necessity in kind of every city in around the globe at this moment. We have a huge global housing crisis, I guess. And at the same time, we want to combine that with creating public facilities for families, which is the school. So we want to open up this school as an extension of the existing school. And on top of that, we place a residential tower. And in this school, in the plinth, we not only create a school, but also a kindergarten, also working, let's say, learning places for youngsters and so forth. So it's going to be sort of a machine for emancipation. And at the same time, a kind of elegant structure in the city of Rotterdam. And that is currently in, as a proposal that we discussed with the city planning, and we're slowly moving that forward. So we hope to start construction by the end of next year. So in the end, so that is in the end the sort of return from this whole sort of movement back and forth, and also the end of my story.
Well, I hope you have more buildings to the story, more in Rotterdam and Amsterdam and all over China, I guess. Yeah, that sounded like you're transposing Hong Kong essentially back in Amsterdam. You know, taking a public program and then placing it all over Tower essentially, right?
Yes.
And I think that's you know, if you've never been to Asia, you would find this interesting, right? Now having been there, I'm like, yeah, this is an obvious solution, right? So you go back and then you try to say, well, all you have to do is just embrace the future rather than think about the past. From my point of view. You mentioned a global housing crisis, right? And in the UK, at least, we kind of like to moan about it and maybe not do anything. What do you think is the global housing crisis from your point of view? I mean, both in Europe and Asia and in America as well.
I think that somehow investment has taken over inner cities. So somehow, I think it's a combination of factors. And of course, I'm not a financial expert, but I think that the fact that the increase of the housing prices globally is developing in a worrying space and also similarity. So somehow people in Sao Paulo, New York, Tokyo, Beijing and Amsterdam are complaining about the same problem, which is the unaffordability of housing for the middle class, right? And this was not an issue 20 years ago, and right now it is certainly, well, it was maybe affordability has always been a question, of course, but I think that certainly it is globally a problem that is massive. And I think it has to do with the fact that investors are discovering housing as a next investment object. So housing is not being considered a right, basic right anymore, but it's been an object of speculation. That's one element of it. In Holland, there's also a couple of other, there's of course the issue of urbanization. So urbanization continues. Family sizes are shrinking, so it means we need more houses for the same amount of people. And these houses have a different size, and so forth and so forth. So there's a series of reasons. But the consequence is that somehow our way of living becomes more and more unaffordable and problematic in that sense.
Thank you for that. So I see you ended with a link to more architecture, right? So the office is active. I kind of checked before we went in that you're looking for interns and particularly new architects, and certainly we provide part of that, right? And where people who would be willing, should COVID-19 not be at the moment active, travel to Amsterdam. So if any of our students would like, I guess they could contact more and see what kind of positions you have available.
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. That was hugely interesting for me. I kind of knew of your work, right? But hearing you talk and be passionate about it, that was kind of fantastic on seeing you kind of interrogate how the state of architecture is in China and Amsterdam and Rotterdam at the moment. I'd like to give the floor to Ronan and Damon for 5710 so that they can close this off.
Thank you, Theo. And first of all, thank you for your patience and bearing with us through our technical difficulties there. And Dan, second of all, thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak to us. We would encourage everyone to go look at More Architecture's website and on their social medias to see what they're working on from now on into the future. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
And normally we would close this off with a drink in the lobby of the school. But I hope I see you in either Aberdeen, Amsterdam, or Shanghai at some point.
Yes.
And maybe enjoy a little bit of baijiu if you like it. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, I'll keep you. Let's keep in touch, and I hope to meet up soon.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a nice
Thank
night.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.